Behind me and before me you surround me. You rest your hand upon my head. Such knowledge is
Today I was happy to get a sunrise picture over the Sea of Galilee before breakfast. The luggage ready to go as I find today's journey to be a long one, as our bus leaves the city of Tiberias and works its way to Haifa. This is on Mount Carmel, and our first stop to stretch our legs was at the base of the Bahá'í Garden Terraces in Haifa at street level. The bus continued up the mountain street to our entrance of the Stella Maris Monastery and Church. This is headquarters for the Carmelite Order of friars and nuns of the world. The bus continued south to Daliyat El Carmel, a Druze town that has a closed society. Our group stopped at a restaurant and had a buffet-style type lunch before going on to the Deir Al Mukhraqa Monastery, where our group had Mass in the St. Elias Church. Later I explored the grounds that have beautiful gardens and great views of the Jezreel Valley. Continuing south along the coastline, our bus stopped at Caesarea and looked at the ancient city built by King Herod that was a reflection of Rome and all its amenities. Our day ends as our bus enters Bethlehem to our next new home, Hotel St. Gabriel.
if I lose myself and dwell among the dead, my God, even there you would call me home. Behind me and before me you surround me. Dark, where my bones were made. In all your works I thank you for your wondrous ways. Every bone, every breath, every day. Me
Christ the Lord. Here we become what we eat.
Gather the people, enter the feast. All are invited, the greatest and least. The banquet is ready, now to be shared. Join in the heavenly feast that God has prepared.
Around this table God's bounty falls on all who hunger and thirst. We drink the fullness of Christ the Lord, so we become what we eat.
Gather the people, enter the feast. All are invited, the greatest and least. The banquet is ready, now to be shared. Join in the heavenly feast that God has prepared. Around this table our hearts rejoice in love that's stronger than death. We'll rise in glory with Christ the Lord, then we become what we eat. Gather the people, enter the feast. All are invited, the greatest and least. The banquet is ready, now to be shared. Join in the heavenly feast that God has prepared.
The lower parking lot, there's a statue of Elijah there.
Oh, it
with
is.
this reading.
It is.
Yeah, so this is actually on a plaque at Holy Hill if you go up there. But Elijah, this is a reading from 1 Kings. Elijah appealed to all the people and said, "How long will you straddle the issue? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal, follow him." The people, however, did not answer him. So Elijah said to the people, "I am the only surviving prophet of the Lord, and there are 450 prophets of Baal. Give us 2 young bulls, let them choose one, cut it into pieces and place it on the wood, and start no fire. I shall prepare the other and place it on the wood, but shall start no fire. You shall call on your God, and I will call on the Lord. The God who answers with fire is God." All the people answered, "Agreed." Elijah then said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose 1 young bull and prepare it first, for there are more of you. Call upon your gods, but do not start the fire." Taking the young bull that was turned over to them, they prepared it. He called on Baal from morning till noon, saying, "Answer us, Baal." But there was no sound, and no one was answering. And they hopped around the altar they had prepared. When it was noon, Elijah taunted them, "Call louder, for he is a god, and may be meditating, or may have retired, or may be on a journey. Perhaps he's asleep, but he must be awakened." They called all the louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as their custom, until blood gushed from them. Noon passed, and they remained in a prophetic state until all the offering sacrificed. But there was not a sound, and no one answered. and no one was listening. Then Elijah said to the people, "Come here to me." When they had done so, he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been destroyed. He took 12 stones for the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the Lord had said, "Your name shall be Israel." He built an altar in honor of the Lord with the stones, and made a trench around the altar large enough for 2 seahs of grain. When he had arranged the wood, he cut up the young bull and placed it on the wood. "Fill up 4 jars with water," he said, "and pour it over the holocaust and over the wood. Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he said, and they did it a 3rd time. The water flowed around the altar, and the trench was filled with water.
At the time of the offering sacrifice, the prophet Elijah came forward and said, "Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are the God of Israel, that I am your servant, and have done all these things by your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, Lord, the God, and that you brought them back to their senses." The Lord's fire came down and consumed the holocaust, wood, stones, dust, and it lapped up the water in the trench. Seeing this, all the people fell prostrate and said, "The Lord is God, the Lord is God." Then Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, let none of them escape." They were seized, and Elijah had them brought down to the brook of Kishon, and there he slit their throats. Elijah then said to Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for this is the sound of heavy rain." So Ahab went up, ate and drank, while Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, crouched down to the earth, and put his head between his knees. "Climb up and look to the sea," he said to his servants, who went up and looked, but reported, "There is nothing." 7 times he said, "Go, look again." And then the 7th time the youth reported, "There is a cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea." Elijah said, "Go and say to Ahab, harness up and leave the mountain before the rain stops you." In a thrice, the sky grew dark with clouds and wind, and heavy rain came and fell down. Ahab mounted his chariot and made for Jezreel. But the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, who girded up his clothing and ran before Ahab as far as the approaches of Jezreel. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
When all your limbs are weary and all your laughter stilled, and all the roads you walk along seem strange, when every face is foreign and every door is closed, and all the food you took with you is gone. Come home where the welcome runs to greet you. Come home to the fire that warms your soul. Return to the soil that bore your infant steps. Return to where I wait for you. lost its luster, and glory fades with time, and foolish ways and youthful days are done. If nothing fills your hunger, and nothing slakes your thirst, and all you know and all you've done seems small, let go of the food that fails to feed you, let go of the drink that dulls your heart, let go of the works that cannot ease your pain. Return to where I wait for you. Come home, a banquet awaits. I will fill you again, and until you return, I will stay. Though your face be dim with the dirt of your years, I will always know my own. Come home where the welcome runs to greet you. Come home to the fire that warms your soul. Return to the soil that bore your infant steps. Return to where I wait for you. Come home. Come home. Come
Like the deer that longs for running streams, so longs my soul for you. So longs my soul for you.
Like the deer that longs for running streams, so longs my soul for you. So longs my soul for you.
Like the doe that pines for running stream, so does my heart for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, the living God. Oh, glad will I be to see your face.
Like the deer that longs for running.
Now, as I told you, I explained to you about the story of Prophet Elijah and Queen Jezebel when they built the two altars on top of Mount Carmel to see whose God is the true God. And we know that when fire came down from heavens and consumed the altar that Elijah built, everybody believed in Elijah. and everybody believed in the God of Israel. And as Elijah instructed the people who were, there, they took all the 450 prophets of Baal to the foot of Mount Carmel, to a place called the Kishon Spring. And they slaughtered all the 450 prophets of Baal. And so that was when Queen Jezebel started to chase Prophet Elijah to revenge the killing of her 450 prophets. And tradition has it that he hid himself in different places in the country, different caves, like near Bethlehem, near Jericho, even further south in Sinai. And one of them was this cave over here, which was used as one of the hiding places of the Prophet Elijah from the anger of Queen Jezebel. Another tradition says that this is where he lived. This is where Prophet Elijah lived, on Mount Carmel. And that's why the Carmelites built this church on top of the cave. Actually, earlier, before the building of this monastery, there is another cave, which is located at the foot of this mountain, that was considered to be the place where he lived. But that place is not accessible nowadays because of security reasons, and that's why the Carmelites built this monastery on top of this cave over here. So it's all about tradition. What do you see over here? This kind of pyramid thing says 1799. 1799 was when Napoleon tried to take over this country, and he did. He took over the whole country except of one city, which is the city of Akko, or the city of Acre, which is on the other side of the bay. And that is nowadays considered to be the most preserved Crusader city. That was the most important city for the Crusaders, especially when they lost control over Jerusalem. This was their capital, because Akko was the gate between Europe and Jerusalem. So everybody coming from Europe had to go first to Akko and then to Jerusalem. So for the Crusaders, that was like the most important city and the most fortified. Even during the Ottoman period, the Muslims, the Ottomans, really and strongly fortified the city of Akko. So for about 3 months, Napoleon laid siege around the city, and he tried to take over it. He couldn't. And when he lost every hope, that's when the famous story, when he took off his hat and he threw it over the walls of the city of Akko, and he said, at least my hat will get into the city of Akko. And that was when he decided to return to Egypt. And during the 3 months of siege around the city of Akko, the Carmelite Monastery served as a hospital or as a clinic for his wounded soldiers. So when he decided to return to Egypt, he didn't pay any attention to his wounded soldiers, and he just went straight back to Egypt. So the Ottomans, the Muslims, came from Akko, and they massacred all those wounded soldiers who were receiving treatment at the hospital over here. So when the Carmelite monks returned to the monastery after that, they buried them in this area over here, and they built this monument to commemorate that. Okay? Father, do you have something to say about Carmelites before we go in?
You're doing well. I'll save mine for the Mass.
Okay. So what we can do, you can go into the church and visit the cave of Prophet Elijah. If you look on the ceiling of the church from inside, you're going to see paintings, beautiful paintings that depicts King David, Prophet Elijah, the Holy Family, and so on.
Your face.
Like the deer that longs for running streams, so longs my soul for you. So longs my soul for you. Like the deer that longs for running streams, so longs my soul for you. So longs my soul for
We can't have a deacon sitting there in a corner like this with your earbuds. That's good.
At least I tripped in a trick. I didn't fall.
The first one is this one, which is called Caesarea Maritima, which is Caesarea by the sea. And the other one is what? Caesarea Philippi, which is up north. Two different cities. One was built by Herod the Great, which is this one over here. And Caesarea Philippi was built by Herod Philip, one of the sons of Herod the Great. You remember, as I told you, that after the death of Herod, his kingdom was divided between his three sons, Antipas, Philip, and Archelaus. So Philip was the one that built Caesarea Philippi, and both of them were named after Augustus Caesar. And that's why they were called Caesarea, after Augustus Caesar. Now, Caesarea Maritima, which is this one over here, is one of the biggest archaeological sites in Israel, and it's considered to be the most beautiful city that Herod has ever built. Do you know what was the most beautiful building that Herod has ever built? The temple. The temple in Jerusalem is considered to be the most beautiful building that Herod has ever built. And we're going to get to talk about this when we go to Jerusalem. Masada is an amazing place. I mean, it's so beautiful. But as a building, not as a city, as a building, the temple was the most beautiful building. As a city, Caesarea was the most beautiful city that he has ever built for one simple reason, which is that it took him 12 years to build Caesarea. And he built it on the highest standards of that time, like with Roman theaters, amphitheaters, hippodromes, palaces, temples, residential areas, sewage system, bathhouses, everything. And after 12 years, when the city was, completed, he came to Caesarea and he didn't like it. He was like, I don't like it. So he gave orders to import white marble from Greece and cover all the main buildings at Caesarea with white marble. And this is what they did. They imported the white marble from Greece and they covered all the major buildings at Caesarea. And that's why it's considered to be the most beautiful city that Herod has ever built. If you look down there, see where that guy is? That's part of the marble, the type of white marble that Herod imported from Greece. There is one piece there and there is another piece over there. And what you see over here, actually, this is a reconstruction. This is not the original Roman theater. It's a reconstruction of it. The only original thing that remained of the Roman theater, this one, is only part of the first row of seats. When we go down, we're going to see it. But everything else is a reconstruction. And this was reconstructed according to the description of Josephus Flavius, the Roman historian who described Caesarea. And we know from Josephus Flavius that this Roman theater could host or seat 4,000 people. And you can notice how Herod built it facing the Mediterranean, because he wanted the breeze coming from the Mediterranean to carry the voices or the sounds all the way up to the people who sit on top. And also, as I told you, if you look at the stage, you'll notice that the stage is lower than any of the seats, because the natural thing for the voices is to go up, not to go down, which is typical Roman theater. Of course, you see the two openings on the stage. Those lead to the underground, area underneath the stage, which was used by the performers as the place where they would dress or, undress. And there were actually underground tunnels from the other side that allowed those performers to come through those tunnels to that area underneath the stage, dress there, and they'll come up from the two openings over there. Yeah. Now, we don't have any biblical or historical reference about Jesus being at Caesarea. So as far as we know, he has never been to this place. But in spite of this, Caesarea is so important for us for so many different reasons. One reason, I mentioned it to you earlier, which is that the first Jewish revolt that started in the year 66 and ended up with the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in Jerusalem, as Jesus prophesied, started over here. Because in the first century, Caesarea was one of the biggest cities, one of the biggest towns, and everybody lived over here. Jews, Gentiles, and Samaritans. And the spark that started the whole revolt started over here. And then it started to spread throughout the whole country. That's what led the Romans to come and lay siege around the city of Jerusalem and destroy the city of Jerusalem. In spite of the fact that their intention was not to destroy the city of Jerusalem. We'll get to talk more about this in Jerusalem. But anyways, the spark that started the whole revolt started over here. This is one reason. The second reason, we know that the first Gentile that converted to Christianity, who was the first Gentile? Cornelius. Cornelius was the first Gentile that converted to Christianity. And it was Apostle Paul, Peter, who came and converted him over here at Caesarea. The book of Acts. Okay, so the first Gentile who converted to Christianity, Cornelius, was over here at Caesarea. The first Jewish revolt started here. The Apostle Paul spent the last 2 years of his life over here at Caesarea, at the prison at Caesarea. The Apostle Paul. And here he made the appeal as a citizen to receive a trial at Herod's palace. And he was taken from here to Rome, where he was executed. So the last 2 years of his life he spent over here at Caesarea. But the most important thing for us as Christians about Caesarea is Pontius Pilate. We know that, again, as I told you, that 3 of the sons of Herod the Great shared his kingdom after his death. Philip and Antipas were given half of the kingdom, which is Galilee. And one son, Archelaus, was given the other half, which is Judea. And Caesarea was the administrative capital of Judea. And Archelaus was the king that did not really satisfy the Romans the same way as his 2 brothers. He was the naughty guy that, he did all his own things. He never listened to the Romans. He never paid taxes to the Romans and so on. So he only stayed as a king on his seat for a few years, 4 or 5 years. Then after that, the Romans came and said, we don't need you. They removed him from his seat, and they had a direct control over his territory, which is Judea, through what we call a Roman representative. And there are many different Roman representatives that ruled over Judea. One of them was Pontius Pilate. Did he exist? This was a huge argument until recently, that almost all scholars argued the existence of a Roman representative by the name Pontius Pilate. And they said he never existed. There was no Roman representative by the name Pontius Pilate, because there is no tangible proof that he existed. And the only mention of Pilate is in the Gospels. There is no other mention of Pilate. No other historical book mentions or talks about Pontius Pilate, except of the Gospels. We know that Josephus Flavius talks a little bit about him, but Josephus Flavius is not like a document that scholars would refer to when it comes to historical facts. There is always arguments and question marks about the authenticity and the accuracy of his narratives. And so because of this, most scholars, until the mid-20s and 30s actually, argued the existence of Pontius Pilate. And that put a huge question mark over the whole story of Jesus. Now through the excavations over here at Caesarea, at the Roman theater over here, they discovered a stone that was used as one of the seats of the Roman theater. And that stone had an inscription on it, and the inscription says, Pontius Pilate, the prefect of Judea, built a temple dedicated to the Emperor Tiberius. And that inscription goes back to that period. And that was enough to end that argument about the existence of Pontius Pilate. And that was enough proof that there was a Roman representative by the name Pontius Pilate. He lived over here at Caesarea, and he built a temple and dedicated the temple to the Emperor Tiberius. We're going to see a replica of that stone. The original one is displayed at the Israeli Museum. And, that was enough to prove that, there was someone called Pontius Pilate. He was the Roman procurator or representative. And he lived at Caesarea, because we know that all the Roman representatives lived at Caesarea. They never lived in Jerusalem. Okay? Jerusalem was a very, very tense place. So all the Roman representatives lived at Caesarea. Only during the Jewish holidays, in particular the Passover, the Roman representative would leave Caesarea and goes to Jerusalem to spend few days in Jerusalem until the Passover is over, like a week in Jerusalem. And he went to Jerusalem just to show respect to the Jews, to make sure that things will go smoothly during the Passover.